So you're not just handed a set of drawings in the traditional design, bid, build format. Here's a set of drawings, price it, put the low number on it, and then have those conversations.
Sure.
That doesn't lend itself to an experience for the client, the customer, that is, transparent in nature, and also they want to be part of it. Constructions can be fun if managed the right way.
I'd like to welcome our listeners to the Boulos Beat podcast. I'm Jon Rizzo, guest hosting for Greg Boulos. The Boulos Company is Northern New England's largest commercial real estate services firm with offices in Portland, Maine, as well as Manchester and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We've been selling and leasing real estate in Maine and New Hampshire since 1975. This podcast is designed to provide insight into Maine's business movers and shakers. And speaking of business leaders, I'd like to welcome Greg Stewart to the Boulos Beat. Greg Stewart is president of Jewett Construction, a fully integrated design-build construction company with a 51-year history in New England. Jewett focuses on its ability to provide its clients a single-source solution to construction in the automotive, advanced manufacturing, warehousing and distribution, cold storage, food processing, and indoor cultivation markets. Through a commitment to excellence and hard work, Greg and Jewett Construction have continued to challenge the status quo and exceed industry standards by forming strong professional partnerships based on integrity, transparency, and creative thinking. Greg has had several roles in his nearly 8 years at Jewett Construction. In his current role as president, Greg is responsible for the day-to-day operation and business of Jewett Construction, ensuring all Jewett clients are receiving the Jewett experience, and creating an environment where all members of the Jewett team are finding personal and professional fulfillment in their roles within the organization. Greg attributes Jewett's significant growth over the last 10 years to the passion the individuals at Jewett have on being more than simply a construction company. At Jewett, it is paramount that each client receives a custom and tailored approach to their project. Greg is a graduate of Tufts University, where he majored in economics, took several entrepreneurial leadership courses, and was a 4-year member of the Tufts football team. Greg currently resides in Wilmington, where he lives with his fiancée Missy and their dog Jordy. Greg, thank you for being our guest today on the Boulos Beat, a Boulos Company podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. Greg Stewart, Jewett Construction, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, John.
Of course. So you and I go back, quite a few years now. We've known each other for a while, worked on some projects together. But how about you give the listeners a little bit of background on you and Jewett and how you got into construction and
certainly
commercial real estate?
Yeah, Jewett Construction, 51 years in business this year. Commercial, fully integrated design build construction management company. We focus on the warehousing, industrial, manufacturing, automotive. A lot of it specialized emerging markets as the economy changes. And been a pleasure to be with the company. We have 56 of the best employees throughout New England and really specialize on giving our clients a custom, tailored approach to construction.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a big thing I wanted to hit on today was that aspect of it. And a lot of our clients, people who are listening, they may see a piece of land and say, hey, you know what, I would love to build a building. It's not as simple as just buy the land, throw the building up. There's a lot that goes into it. Yep. And so, in projects that you've been working on recently, what would you say is, all right, if there's, an A-plus client that you're working with, what did they do to make the process so smooth? And then on the flip end of that, what are some pitfalls that you might see and, our listeners can avoid?
Yeah, every client's a little different. The ideal client is a client that wants to be part of the process and works with a Boulos, a Jewett, and works towards very specific expectations, understanding what the goals of the project are, not just for cost, delivery, but the overall function of the building and laying that out early so that they can leave the experts to design and ultimately build that facility. And a lot goes into it, like you said, land selection, understanding the risks, mitigating risks, and outlining those risks at different iterations of the process.
When do you think it's appropriate for someone to get a Jewett involved in terms of identifying the site? Do they do that? Do you want them to kind of bring you along the whole every step of the way?
I think it's obviously the earlier the better. I think that sometimes works to our detriment because there's a lot of exercising that goes on, and that's part of who we are. We expect to work through the process. We may look, and you and I have looked at a piece of land for a client, probably looked at 10 before we ultimately land on the final resting spot on where that building is going to be. But the earlier the better, with the understanding that every site is a bit different, and knowing the site characteristics, the utilities, what's under the ground, and informing those decisions. And it's not as easy as this is a good piece of land, it's a good price. Understanding truly what you're buying as a client is very important. So I'd say, to answer that question, earlier the better, and also having a good civil engineer on board at that juncture is paramount.
Yep. So let's talk on the land side a bit. So someone purchases a raw piece of land. It's got trees. It's got maybe some wetlands. You've done your surveys. You understand what you can possibly build on that site. You go ahead and you clear the site. What's kind of the next process there? Obviously, we're here at Scarborough Downs, and you can see the site on the corner where Costco is going, and they're doing some preloading right now. Which talk about preloading a little bit. Time frames on that. Maybe some of those pitfalls that someone could say, oh, I want my building to be built in 12 months, and you have to sit on the dirt for probably 4 or 5 months to let it settle before you can put the building up. If you can go into some of that detail, I think that would be super helpful.
Yeah, certainly. So usually before you're buying the land, at least getting a geotech or a subsemblance or test pits to understand what's in the ground. And, informing what, if any, is going to be required to put that building up. Also, kind of running parallel paths, understanding what's approved, what's allowable at the site, what the demand for the utilities is going to be, and also what the timing is going to be on that. So we always say kind of play the whole backwards, start with the end in mind, and look at the longest lead times, getting electric to the site, getting those utilities, getting gas to the site, and working your way backwards so that you're constructing the building and then not waiting for these things to percolate, if you will.
Sure.
Talking to those municipalities, talking to the utility providers early in the process, and just being transparent. The key in our business is transparency, whether it's with the clients, with our subcontractors, understanding risks, understanding market factors. Long lead times has been a big thing in our business, and finding ways to navigate around, whether it be a long lead time for something as silly as roof insulation, which we saw months ago, a couple of years ago, and ordering that insulation maybe earlier than when you have the design figured out, so that when you're ready to put the roof on, you're not waiting.
Sure. And
the design build approach allows you to accommodate and do that early release components, but really starting with the end in mind.
That makes a lot of sense. Projects that you're working on now, what has been probably the hottest product type that you've been working on recently?
We've done the last few years a lot of warehousing, industrial distribution. We've done probably over 1 million square feet of that in the last 2 years. I'd say right now in the current moment, we're doing a lot of automotive throughout New England. We have a big job coming up in Connecticut, $15 million Porsche dealership, several other dealerships. So the warehousing, we're diverse. Diversity is kind of the core to our business. And we chose niche markets that kind of complement one another.
Sure.
The warehousing has been very hot, and there's a lot of demand, and there still is. I think the rising interest rates have maybe stalled it a bit, but there's a lot in the pipeline behind it. Counter that with the automotive, which there's a lot of pressure from the brands to upgrade the facilities right now. So we're leveraging our niche markets to complement and help our business as the economy kind of shifts.
Yep. So talking about the warehousing and on the industrial side of things, I do a lot of industrial real estate here and down in Massachusetts as well. But the issue that we've seen on the brokerage side is you have a client who has a great piece of property, but right now they can't. Either A, they don't want to construct a building on speculation because there's a lot of risk there, of course. It's hard to finance that project, and you could be building a building that needs to be altered for a tenant who decides to come in and they need different tailboard docks, or they need different drive-in doors. So the issue is really construction costs and being able to build a building efficiently and not have the lease rates skyrocket, which we have seen that. We've seen lease rates creep up in the industrial real estate market. The vacancy rate is sub 2% still. So there's no supply out there. The demand is still pretty strong. It has slowed a little bit, it seems, because I think everyone's in a, let's see what happens with the economy. Let's see what happens maybe in the next election cycle, et cetera. A lot of decisions are made right or wrong around that. But when we're dealing with clients, we're seeing, okay, well, there's sub 2 vacancy rate, like I mentioned. If you build this building, if you build it, they will come type thing. I think it's super important to really understand where, the potential speed bumps are, which is, kind of where I'd like you to harp on a little bit. So you're designing this building, you're putting it up, whether it's, let's talk about a spec building. Where is the appropriate place to save money, to keep those costs down and therefore keep the lease rate, somewhat in check to entice these end users, these tenants?
Certainly, I think it's funny. When you build, when the walls go up, they will come. But the question is who? Who is coming? And having that ability to have a flexible building without spending costs that are unneeded, but to have the flexibility in a speculative building. We're building right now 220,000 square foot distribution flex type buildings on a speculative basis. We designed, built that, moved quick. We were engaged with the client in summer of 2021, and we're almost complete now. But I call it the Chinese food menu. We weigh the options, so knockout panels, upsize of steel to accommodate future roof loads, and kind of all the different iterations of how to make this building as flexible as possible, all of which comes with a cost. And really leaning on the brokers and understanding what that marketplace demand is in that given area and making decisions with the real estate brokerage team, informing it based on the demand and also informing it on a cost basis. And weighing all those options and then having a conversation about what the pros and cons are. Also, what are the costs going to be if we don't elect to do this option, but then the tenant comes along and they need that option? What is the cost going to be then? And what's the time implication as well to do it after the fact? And just having that transparent discussion with our clients and the brokerage team and weighing those options.
Sure.
That when I say transparency and a collaborative approach, that's the key to building on a speculative basis. And providing all of this information, then making informed decisions.
Have you been seeing this elsewhere? I know we've seen it in our market where someone puts up a spec building. And again, all of a sudden tenants kind of come out of the woodwork once they see that the walls are going up or the foundation's in, and it becomes real. Are you seeing that elsewhere in New England?
Always, yeah. I think the end user needs to see the facility. You can look at it on a piece of paper. You can look at a drawing to understand this is 300 feet, 400 feet, but to understand what the building actually looks like, feels like, 36-foot clear doesn't necessarily mean 36-foot clear until you see it. And having those end users see the facility and then also see their vision of that space, there's so much truth to that. Is
there a recommended clear height? I know it's very specific to end users and whatnot. A tenant may say, I need 50-foot clear, based on what they're doing. But is there a sweet spot from a cost perspective where if you go above a certain height, it becomes a little bit cost prohibitive?
Yeah, it's funny. The clear height requirement seems to have climbed exponentially every single time. It used to be 26, then it was 32, then it's 36, 40. Obviously, the higher you go, the more cost there is. So it's more wall surface, more heating and cooling, more steel, so on and so forth. I'd say that the clear height is real on a speculative basis. That 32 to 36 in my mind is a sweet spot. Anything above and beyond is great, but the tenants that need that 40-foot clear may not be as readily available if you're building on a speculative basis. But again, I'd always lean on people like yourself, John, to say, hey, what is the market presenting and what are you seeing in the marketplace so that we can inform our clients on that?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. In speaking on some of these other projects you're doing with the automotive businesses, I'm assuming they're existing dealerships. Do they have sites that they've already identified? What has been the process there? Have you been part of the process of identifying those sites?
Typically, the automotive world, a lot of it is renovations or because there's points. We are looking at and going to be building a very large facility down in Massachusetts for a Hyundai dealership. And that site was already sourced. They had it under agreement. They saw the vision. And we have to work within those boundaries of the brands themselves. There's not as much flexibility in the automotive world with the requirements from, the Audis, the Hyundais, the Porsches.
Because it's driven by their parent companies mainly, right?
Yeah, their prototype.
Yep.
They want similarities between those dealerships, and they've done studies that, XYZ produce better margins for the auto dealers. And oftentimes, though, when we're working in existing facilities, it's really accommodating those prototype designs into an existing facility, existing space. And that takes a lot of creativity. Building it out of the ground is one thing. Taking an existing facility and then modifying it to not only meet the prototypes, but then to ultimately function better for the dealer is challenging and complicated, and that's kind of the fun part of the business.
Do you think that it's more, on a price per square foot basis, is it similar to just go in and retrofit a building cost-wise than to just go complete ground up?
It's a hard question to answer. The economies to scale would vary greatly. I don't know how to answer that, frankly. They all have their intricacies.
Yeah. Every building is different, and all that good stuff. And I would say, the projects that we've seen, or the projects here in Scarborough Downs specifically as well, it was people looking at their options saying, well, if I can find a piece of land that works, I can build something specific to what I want and what I need, and there's efficiencies there. Plus, the lack of inventory was just driving existing pricing up for existing buildings. And so, a lot of people started saying, hey, well, I'll spend a few more bucks and build something brand new and specific to what I need. So those have been the successful projects that we've seen for sure. The ones that get a little bit murky are when you aren't really looking or working with the right team for sure. And again, it's building that trust and being transparent across the board, which I think you've hit on a couple of times, and I think is super important, especially in this world right now. Construction costs are up. You mentioned earlier that they're coming down slightly, which is probably good across the board. But it's management of the timelines that's probably more critical.
Yes. Yeah, everybody, every project has a timeline. And whether it be to get the building done, or in the automotive world especially, getting their people back into the space. These renovations are, they're problematic for the overall flow of their business, and we need to find ways to accommodate not only their business, the safety of their customers, the safety of their people. Does it make sense to phase it so they're working on a portion of the dealership and while we work on the other, or move them completely out in trailers? And those are conversations that there is no right answer other than what does the client want to see as far as function and format of their facility while we're doing it. So understanding those timelines, working through that, weighing those options, just like we give the Chinese food menu for cost, we do it for time too. If we were to move you out of this facility, you'd be in trailers for this long, and this is the schedule. Or if we were to do it as a phased approach, it might take a little bit longer. This is what the timeline looks like. How would you like us to proceed? And figuring those things out as you're designing it, as you're planning the building, as you're planning the construction, are huge. So you're not just handed a set of drawings in the traditional design, bid, build format. Here's a set of drawings, price it, put the low number on it, and then have those conversations.
Sure.
That doesn't lend itself to an experience for the client, the customer, that is, transparent in nature, and also they want to be part of it. Constructions can be fun if managed the right way. Yeah,
for sure. And speaking on timelines, I know it's going to be somewhat of a loaded question because every site's different, every municipality is different. What do you see typically for, the design stage that gets it basically from, getting the drawings on paper to actual permits and approvals? And then once permits and approvals are in hand, how long have you been seeing the building go up? And, kind of the overall timing from someone identifies a piece of land to buildings, constructed and ready for occupancy.
Absolutely. Let's use that speculative distribution facility we talked about earlier. We were engaged with that client, a big developer out of Boston. It was about July of 2021. Now, a caveat that was they had bought the piece of land with a prior approval, which had multiple buildings on it, not two. So we did have some benefit there for at least some site component. We'll get to that. But July 2021, we went from July to essentially November, middle of November, end of November, we had a contract in place. So we had designed it, priced it, contracted it, ready to go. We did do some iterations along the way. We did an early release package for the steel. We did an early release package for the site work component in advance of getting the final design, and as the design caught up, so that we had the steel locked in, we had the lead times locked in, so it would line up with our overall schedule and our anticipated start date. And that was the job. We ordered the roof installation as well early. And ultimately, we're breaking ground. We could have broke ground in January, but the big wild card is always the approvals, because we had to go back through the approval process. And we started in mid to late February of 2022. And fast forward to today, April 4th, we're painting the outside of the buildings and going to be final paving in a few weeks.
Okay, so almost 2 years.
Yeah, about 2 years from start design to complete.
Yeah. And the reason why I ask is if someone's contemplating for their business, maybe building new, and they've outgrown their current facility, it's important. You have a lease in place, potentially, and so you have to manage those timelines as well. And the realistic expectation, so you don't get yourself stuck in a pickle, I think is important for people to grasp. And yeah, it can take every part of 2 years. It could take longer. It could be a lot faster as well. Right. But giving yourself that runway is hugely important.
I think setting realistic expectations from the get-go, and not over-promising and getting hopes, and set reality. And let's see if we can beat it. And here's some ways that we might be able to expedite it.
Sure.
But starting with a realistic expectation does everybody a lot of favors at the end of the day.
Have you guys, shifting gears a little bit, but it ties into this whole conversation, but have you guys seen issues with the labor shortage and the labor market?
I would say that's always going to be and continue to be probably one of the biggest challenges in our business. And we need more people in the field. There's this stigma that, you can't wear work boots to work. And that's been something that has really hurt our business and needs to change, frankly. There's a lot of opportunity. I look at some of these electricians out in the field, and the things that they do are mind-boggling. They're incredibly complicated. It's very in tune, and I think we need to get the word out that, going into a trade is a great opportunity for people that are thinking about whether they want to go to college or not. I went the traditional route. I went to college, but there's a whole nother route, and I look at these individuals and not only, the buy-in and the impact that they could have at a very early age, but also the financial benefits that they get from being in the trades.
Yeah.
It's significant.
Yeah, no, I hear it all the time. People are saying there needs to be more people getting into the trades, more young people out there, because a lot of these guys who have been doing it for years and years are approaching retirement age, right. And it's a little bit scary. You have a demand out there, and people who are still doing great business, and it's tough to get a building built or a building reconfigured or fit up a different way. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of how that comes about.
Yeah, I think you're seeing more and more of it. It takes time to shift. I think if you asked me 5 years ago, the average age in the field, it has definitely gone down over the last 5 years, and I hope that it will continue.
That's good.
Good.
So you went to Tufts, you played football there, you graduated Tufts. Did you get right into construction and this side of the business?
Yeah, so I kind of wound up into construction by chance. I didn't know what I wanted to do coming out of high school, so I was a decent football player. I got pretty good grades and had the great fortune I said, hey, I'm going to go to the best school that I can possibly get into with these kind of extras, the football being one of them. And so I found myself at Tufts, and still didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. And I had the opportunity to meet one of my teammates' fathers who owned a construction company in northern Massachusetts, great company. And he offered me an opportunity to push a broom in college. So that's where I started, and I was just pushed that broom for quite some time and just observed. And I really kind of fell in love with the process, not just the construction, but the team mentality. Coming from a sports background, construction is the ultimate team sport. You have, your offensive linemen, everybody has different aspects and what they're good at. The offensive lineman's not going to catch a ball, but the quarterback's also not going to block. And that's kind of construction, is you have your estimating, you have your superintendents, your project managers, your accounting team that are all very good at those individual aspects, but all work collectively towards one goal on the project.
That's a good analogy.
And I fell in love with it. I love pushing a broom, got an opportunity to start in the field, which is where I started, and then ultimately into the estimating, project management, and then had the great fortune of meeting Craig Jewett, who is the owner of Jewett Construction, who gave a young guy a shot to run their pre-construction department. And
how'd you meet Craig? Just through the business?
Funny. So I met Craig. He had interviewed an individual that I had previously worked with, and ultimately they didn't get together or deal. And that individual I worked with said, "Hey, if you're looking for someone in the estimating department, give this guy a call." I didn't know Craig previously. I didn't know anybody that worked at Jewett. And at the time I was thinking, hey, I had this great opportunity to get involved in this company that I started with. Can I really do this on my own? Where I don't know anybody, take my commute, which was probably about 10 minutes, and make it an hour and a half commute. And I said, let's give it a shot. I really liked what Craig was saying about his vision forward and the growth. There were some similarities in the marketplaces that those two companies did, but not a ton of overlap.
Sure.
And I said, why not? Let's go up there. And I saw a lot of opportunity in the New Hampshire and the Maine markets where there's available land. There's great subs in Maine and New Hampshire. And I said, let's give it a shot, and the rest is history. So,
what would you say? You mentioned you have a project going on in every state in New England except for Rhode Island right now. Where's majority? I know you guys are headquartered in New Hampshire. Is that where bulk of your business has been historically?
Yeah, our main office is in Fremont, New Hampshire. We have another office in Falmouth, Maine. And I'd say that our work, it changes by year. We've done a lot in Massachusetts. This upcoming year, we're going to be doing a lot in Connecticut. We always consistently have probably 3 projects going in Maine. And New Hampshire, about the same. We're shifting more towards that New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut market, but it's really where the clients are.
Sure.
The majority of our work's done on a repeat basis, repeat referral. So we go where the clients ask to go. We actually are flying down to Mechanicsville, Virginia in a couple weeks because an existing client out of New England wants us to build their facility down in Mechanicsville, Virginia. So,
is that going to be challenging with the sub-market and whatnot?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have your connections up here that you've known for years and years. So in that type of situation, what do you guys do to feel comfortable as well? Because if you guys are hiring on these subs and people who are going to be executing on the build, how do you vet that?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time in Mechanicsville, Virginia. So that's what we're going to be down there. And it's not, you need to know who you're working with.
Yeah.
And they need to know who they're working with. And, it's simple. A handshake, putting a face to a name, and explaining what the process is, introducing yourself, and understanding that market. You're going to get more relationships by doing this. One handshake will lead to 5 more introductions in other trades. So we're going to spend a lot of time down there, evaluate the marketplace, talk to these subcontractors, probably spend more one-on-one time with those subcontractors than we would with subs that we work with on a regular day basis here. We will bring one of our superintendents down there.
Yeah.
And, ideally bring someone on board to train and groom, but we won't go out there. We need to stay consistent with our brand and how we run a project. Every job needs to be run the same, and we've had a great amount of interest from our field team to go down in some warmer climates.
Yeah,
so
I'm sure.
That wasn't a problem soliciting volunteers, if you will.
Yeah, that's good. Around here, have there been any municipalities or any states in particular that have been easier to work with than others?
I wouldn't say easier. I think they all have their intricacies, and it's just knowing what those are. Knowing who the electrical power provider is in this state versus this state and what they want to see.
Sure.
They all have, I wouldn't say they're easier or harder by any means, but what they ask for and what they want to see is different, and understanding that and then providing them that. And abiding by what they want to see and knowing their process is huge.
Yeah, and I mean, that comes with experience too. You guys do a couple projects and then all of a sudden it streamlines, future projects going forward. So, well, no, I appreciate it. I think we've covered quite a bit of information. I think that'll be very interesting for our listeners to to dig into on the construction side, which I really appreciate. It's sometimes somewhat of a mythical type world, because if you haven't done a project from the ground up, it may seem very intimidating, but and it can be for sure. You got to have the right team with you doing the project, kind of step by step. But it is, to your point, very, very satisfying. Oftentimes, it's very necessary for a business owner, an end user, or an investor, for that matter, to build new. So I really appreciate all the insight today. That was very, very helpful.
And the process and understanding those clients' experience with construction, and really being open and honest with that, and understanding, hey, this person has done 30 projects, they know what they want.
Sure.
And charging towards, and also understanding, hey, this might be their first project, and working them through the process that you wouldn't otherwise have to do with someone that's done 30 projects before. Just getting intimate and personal relationship with your clients is so important. So
very good. Well, thanks a lot, Greg.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for coming on the Boulos Beat.
No, very, very much appreciated.
Greg, thank you for being our guest today on the Boulos Beat, a Boulos Company podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. You can learn more about Greg and Jewett Construction at the company's website, jewettconstruction.com, and on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Jewett Construct. And if you'd like to learn more about the Boulos Company, please be sure to visit us at www.boulos.com. You can find us at the Boulos Company on Facebook and LinkedIn, and at the Boulos Co on Instagram and Twitter. And lastly, if you want to know the secret to owning real estate, it's pretty simple. Just be sure to outlive your debt.